And after completing a very successful visit to the UK, signing some of the very key trade deals, Prime Minister Modi has now emplaced to his first ever state visit to Maldives, that too when Mohammad Muizzu has taken office back in the year of 2023. What's exactly there on the cards? Let's discuss. Prime Minister Modi concluded his two-day official visit to the UK on Thursday. Modi extended an invitation to Prime Minister Keir Starmer to visit India, which he has in fact accepted. In the second leg of his four-day two-nation tour, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has embarked on a two-day state visit to Maldives on Friday at the invitation of President Mohammad Muizzu. Prime Minister Modi will attend the Maldives' 60th Independence Day celebration in capital Malé on Saturday. Modi is the first foreign head of state to be hosted by President Muizzu. Modi's presence will mark a major turnaround in the ties between the two nations. In fact, Modi is also going to inaugurate development projects funded by India there in Maldives. The Indian government has extended crucial financial support by rolling over the US $50 million Treasury bill for another year. Prime Minister Modi will hold bilateral talks with Mohammad Muizzu, which will include national security concerns in the Indian Ocean region. India continues to assist Maldives by training its defense personnel, as the two sides also have robust defense and security cooperation, including naval exercises. My colleague Karthik Malhotra, executive editor of News9, is joining us live on the broadcast. Karthik, things have changed over a month, I would say, because from India out to now inviting India to attend their own Independence Day celebrations, looks like things have changed. We have traveled down a lot on that path.
Hi, Sakshi. Yeah, so I think it's been more than a month. In fact, one would say that this is viewed by many as a diplomatic reset in the thawing of relations between India and Maldives. Remember, India and Maldives have been great maritime neighbors for many decades now. But ever since President Muizzu assumed office in the month of November 2023, his India out policy and cozying up to China was something which was not taken well by India, and rightfully so. Now, what really transpired was this entire, like you've mentioned, there was this radicalization happening already in Maldives after the former president, President Mohammad Nasheed, was ousted out of office and President Muizzu came to power. There was this cozying up to China in a bid to perhaps attract more Chinese tourists and Chinese investments into Maldives, and that is something which did not really augur well with India's foreign policy. Remember, India historically has been the first port of call anytime Maldives has faced any emergency, any situation where Maldives has required a bailout. India has been the first responder, and that is something that former President of Maldives, Nasheed, has also acknowledged on record more than once. Now, we saw in November 2023 this relationship getting strained primarily with President Muizzu really wanting China and Chinese influence to come into the island nation. And since then, situation just began to turn around a little bit from the beautiful ties that India and Maldives held for decades. But one would say that perhaps that friction, if one can call it that, lasted just a few months. And in August of last year, 2024, we had our Foreign Affairs Minister, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar travel to Maldives in the first reset button being pushed with the state of Maldives. That was immediately followed by President Muizzu coming to India in the month of October last year and coming on record and acknowledging that nothing that Maldives would do would be to destabilize India's security interests. And since then, we've seen it's been about a year since President Muizzu came to India. Since then, we've seen the friction has been at some level eliminated, and there is a better friendly environment which is up for grabs for both the nations. And now with Prime Minister Modi's visit to Maldives today and tomorrow, in fact, Prime Minister Modi is the guest of honor for the Maldives Independence Day tomorrow. One would say that this is pretty much a diplomatic reset, and any friction that was there, which began 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago or so, is pretty much something that both the nations can look back and call it sort of, water under the bridge. So it seems that this is a real diplomatic reset, and the path from here, hopefully with trade agreements and with other cooperation agreements being signed, is something that one should expect should pave the way for the friendship that India and Maldives enjoyed until November 2023 and then came back on track since October last year, is something that can now be looked at as the road ahead for the relationship between the two countries.
Absolutely, Karthik. Something crucial that you had, earlier mentioned is about Mohammad Muizzu's inclination towards China, how he cozy ups to China. This time around, this invitation that he himself sent to Prime Minister Modi to attend the Independence Day celebrations over there, what kind of messaging will be sent out to China from Maldivian end?
Right. So I think, Maldives also, given the strategic location in the Indian Ocean where Maldives as a country resides, I think Maldives has a tough sort of balancing act to make, simply because it can't afford to mess with India, which is its immediate neighbor and the first port of call in case of any emergency. At the same time, China is a larger, a much bigger economy than India, and there is a greater potential of attracting more investments from China as well as tourists from China, which was pretty much the agenda of the India out policy, foreign policy under President Muizzu. So I think there isn't really much to read in some sort of a defiance that President Muizzu is offering to China. Rather, one would see that this is diplomacy 101, where the interest of its own nation for Maldives is paramount, where it cannot afford to burn bridges with India. At the same time, it cannot really afford to offend China as well. So I think at one level, one would see this as some sort of a balancing act where, as President Muizzu assumed office, there was this immediate rush to cozy up to China and get Chinese tourists, get Chinese investments into the country, but at the same time realizing that perhaps not being friendly with India and antagonizing India is not the best foreign policy. So I would best define it as a balancing act which is being portrayed here by President Muizzu.
Absolutely. Karthik, and since we are speaking about the diplomacy 101 over here, we know that there is going to be a bilateral talk between the two leaders as well. Are we expecting talk on Islamic radicalization that has been shown from President Mohammad Muizzu's end? Are we expecting any hard talk on that?
Well, that is something that we will have to wait and watch for. This is definitely something which is of a concern to President Muizzu, and it is of a concern to the people of Maldives. And the Islamic radicalization is something which not just Maldives but multiple countries across the world are dealing with at the moment. So I think it is definitely an agenda for Maldives as a government, for President Muizzu as the state head. Is this something where India would be able to fundamentally support the cause, and would that crop up as a part of the bilateral discussions is something that we really don't know at the moment. But what we do know is that drug trade, drug trafficking is something which is of a big concern, and that is an area where President Muizzu is hoping that India could support, India could help. At the same time, remember, even at an economic level, at a development level, India has, and this is something that President Nasheed had mentioned, last year at some point, that India has always been in a position to bail out Maldives from any default that it has made. So at some level, if Islamic radicalization coupled with drug trafficking, drug trade is something which is pulling down the economy of Maldives, that is where it would perhaps look at some sort of a support, some sort of assistance from India, either at a strategic level or at an economic level. But specifically Islamic radicalization, I'm not sure whether that is something which President Muizzu would prefer to discuss with Prime Minister Modi on this historic visit.
Also, let's talk about India's influence on Maldives this time around, Karthik. We all know that as far as Maldives' tourism sector is concerned, India is a very key partner to them. So this time around, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Maldives is going to be a very, very important thing for Maldives as well, right? Not only for us and our presence in Indian Ocean region.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, tourism is a big economic sector for Maldives, and it attracts tourists from all parts of the world, especially from India, given India's proximity, the flight time, the cost of tickets, etc. So it becomes a lucrative travel destination for Indians. In fact, If you remember 2023, December 2023, and even in 2024, one of India's own biggest tourism hotspots, Goa, actually did not see as much influx of tourists as Maldives did. So I believe, and 2024 rather, not 2023. So I believe, at some level, yes, tourism is a big economic sector for Maldives, but the economic relationship between India and Maldives is not limited to tourism alone. And that is again something that President Muizzu will find in his interest to try and bolster. So of course, what Prime Minister Modi had said, that our trade has actually expanded from sugar, which was one of the key essential items that India used to export to Maldives at one time, to Mahasagar, which is the Indian Ocean. So it is maritime security, it is pharmaceuticals, it is agri-exports. We are talking about multiple sectors where India will find a market in Maldives. Maldives will find it in its interest to attract India's exports and Indian investments. Add to that, of course, there is a treasury bill, $50 million, which for the second time India has approved. And this again is something which is economically helping Maldives. And what, again, I go back to former president of Maldives, President Nasheed, who had said that had India not come to Maldives' rescue in the past, then Maldives may have defaulted. So I think there is an economic partnership between India and Maldives, which is of great interest to Maldives, given proximity to India, given the prices at which India is able to export essential items to Maldives. But at the same time, tourism, while it's a large revenue driver, it's not the only thing that binds revenue from India coming into Maldives. In fact, there are multiple other sectors which should also be in focus.
Absolutely, Karthik, and also we know that Modi government has been very vocal and very attentive about their neighborhood policy. This time around, Prime Minister Modi's first state visit to Maldives ever since President Muizzu took office back in the year of 2023. Can we say this is going to be another feather in his hat?
Absolutely. I mean, no doubt about that. I think Prime Minister Modi has been vocal on multiple occasions about India's neighborhood-first policy. And neighborhood-first foreign policy is pretty much a testament that India demonstrates and lives by every day. I mean, we've seen even as recently as the plane that went down in a school in Bangladesh. And India and Bangladesh at this moment are not at the friendliest terms that they've ever seen in the past. In fact, despite that, the plane that went down, India was among the first countries and the only countries to send support to Bangladesh in terms of the burn specialists that flew down from India. So the neighborhood policy is absolutely a testament that India lives by. This is something that is intrinsic part of India's foreign policy. Prime Minister Modi displaying that not just with Bangladesh, the example I just gave you, but it has been displayed on multiple occasions with countries like Sri Lanka, with countries like Maldives, with countries like Nepal. And I think it is something which is again going to be on display on this historic visit of Prime Minister Modi to Maldives, given the fact that he is guest of honor and has come to the aid of Maldives on more occasions than one, and the effort by both the countries to thaw that friction which had erupted as soon as President Muizzu had assumed office in 2023, and in his bid to woo Chinese tourists and Chinese investments. I think overall India has taken this leadership stand. India has let that incident pretty much, go down, flow down as water under the bridge, and is not really looking at that past incident to define its future relationship with Maldives under its overall neighborhood first policy.